A small town on the outskirts of the forest had always been a quiet and safe place. The people knew each other well, had friendly relationships, and rarely encountered any danger. But recently, that peace had been disturbed. People started disappearing. At first, it was just a few cases, but over time, the number grew. The police were powerless, unable to find any clues or traces of the missing individuals. Alex, a teenager attending high school, didn't pay much attention to these events. He had many friends, was active in school, and cared more about exams and parties than the missing people. But everything changed when his classmate Andrew disappeared. Andrew was one of Alex's closest friends, and his disappearance shocked not only their friends, but the entire school. The search for Andrew became a priority for the whole town. The police organized volunteer groups to search the surrounding areas, especially the dense, dark forest that bordered the town. This forest had always been a spooky place, full of eerie legends, but until now, no one had taken them seriously. However, everything was different now. People knew that something dark was lurking in the shadows of the trees. Alex, along with his friends, Ryan, Chris, and Ben, decided to join the search. Their group headed into the forest at dusk as the town fell into darkness. The boys walked with flashlights, but even the faint beams of light couldn't dispel the tension that hung in the air. The night was gloomy, the moon casting a pale, eerie glow, creating sinister shadows. Fog enveloped the trees, and the branches creaked in the light breeze. The boys walked in silence, occasionally exchanging anxious glances. They weren't just scared of the dark, they feared what they might find in it. "Has anyone seen Andrew since he disappeared?" Ryan asked quietly, glancing around. No one," Alex replied, gripping his flashlight tighter as if it could protect him from whatever was hiding in the woods. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the anxiety grew. Every sound seemed more than just the wind or an animal. It felt like something far more terrifying. Each step became heavier, as if the forest didn't want to let them pass. The silence was so thick, it felt like the air around them was becoming denser and harder to breathe. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from behind the trees. It was soft but unmistakable, like something large moving through the woods. The boys froze, their hearts racing faster than ever. Each of them was too afraid to even breathe, worried it might attract the attention of whatever was lurking in the shadows. "What was that?" Chris whispered, his voice trembling with fear. "Maybe it's just an animal." Alex tried to reassure them, but his voice lacked confidence. Then, Alex felt something strange. His body started to tighten with a pain he had never experienced before. He tried to take a step forward, but his legs buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. His heart raced uncontrollably, his head spun, and his hands trembled as each breath brought more pain. "Something's wrong," he whispered, trying to control himself, but the pain only intensified. His friends, terrified, approached him, trying to help. But suddenly, they saw Alex begin to change. His eyes glowed with an unusual yellow light, and his body rapidly transformed. Bones cracked and reshaped, his skin grew thicker, and fur began to sprout. They stood there in horror, unable to understand what was happening. "Alex!" Ryan yelled, trying to run toward his friend, but it was already too late. Standing before him was a creature that had been human just moments ago. It looked at them with cold, predatory eyes, filled with danger. Suddenly, the creature lunged at Chris. The movement was so quick that no one had time to react. The creature knocked him to the ground, and Chris immediately passed out. Ryan and Ben stood frozen in place, paralyzed by shock. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their friend Alex had become a monster, but they realized they needed to act, or they would be next. "Run!" Ryan shouted, grabbing Ben by the arm. They bolted in the direction they had come from, but Alex, or whatever he had become, was already chasing them. His movements were swift, like those of a wild animal, and the boys knew they wouldn't be able to outrun him for long. Ben suddenly slipped and fell to the ground. Ryan tried to help him up, but just then, he sensed something closing in from the darkness. The creature grabbed Ben and dragged him into the shadowy trees. Ben managed to scream, but his voice quickly faded into the night. Ryan, filled with terror, kept running, his heart pounding like never before. He finally reached the edge of the forest, where he saw a group of people with flashlights, other search teams. He staggered toward them, barely able to stand. "Werewolf, he's here!" Ryan shouted, trying to explain what had happened. The people stared at him in disbelief, unable to process his words. But then, out of the darkness, appeared the same creature, Alex. People began to scatter, realizing this was no ordinary search for a missing boy. The police opened fire, trying to stop the creature, but it was too fast. The bullets only seemed to anger it. The creature lunged at one of the officers, knocking him to the ground. Others screamed and ran in panic, realizing they were no match for the beast. Ryan stood on the sidelines, unable to believe what had happened. His friend, Alex, was no longer human. He had become a monster, and no one knew how to stop him. The town would never be the same again.